Imagine this, you're about to score yourself a killer deal on a second-hand Amarok, but one wrong move could turn your dream rig into a money pit, or worse, leave you stranded in the middle of nowhere. Well, how do you know what to look out for to nail that perfect buy? I'm Josh, and today I'm doing a deep dive into buying a used Amarok. From the hidden issues to the pros and cons of modifications, and most importantly, how these beasts perform off-road. But I'm not doing this alone. I'm here with the team at Advanced Installation Service in Emu Plains, where they've been building and modifying Amaroks for over a decade. By the end of this video, you're going to walk away with a crystal clear checklist on what to look for to score that perfect Amarok. From the mods that are worth it to what's not, and most importantly, how this vehicle performs off-road. Be it a daily driver or an overland beast, this is your ultimate guide to a second-hand purchase on an Amarok. So stick around because you don't want to miss this. When did you start Advanced Installs?
I've been working in the industry for over 30 years, but I started Advanced Installation Service in Western Australia actually, probably 15 years ago.
I was 15 and 9 months when I decided to get out of school and go and play this trade. So 20 plus years.
3 years.
3 years?
Yeah.
What, have you finished your apprenticeship already?
Almost, and getting very close. Started my apprenticeship in 06.
So 20 years now,
just about.
Just doing car phones and sort of a bit of fast move stuff for a while.
Yeah, sure. And that evolved into the Advanced Installation Services we know it now.
Yep.
Which is 3, 4 full-time mechanics?
Yeah, so we got pretty much 3 full-time mechanics, and an apprentice, and a 1 day a week apprentice. And Maddie on the front camera.
I did my apprenticeship for Volkswagen.
Yep.
And I've done different things.
Light vehicle, but I've done time on trucks as well, and machinery.
Yep. Yeah. What other four-wheel drives have you driven outside of the world of Amarok? And how long has it been in your blood?
Well, a hell of a lot really. Had a bit of done a bit of a comp scene for a long while as well, but effectively I started out four-wheel driving in my late teens in a 1982 four-door Range Rover, coil sprung, V8, pretty spoilt as far as the ability of a car like that off-road, and then had a bit of a fairly long Land Rover experience for a while, so I had a few discoveries and a couple of series and played around with those for a long time.
And you've still got the chicken coop in the back of Unit 5.
Yeah, still got a couple of Land Rovers, but I moved to some more reliable vehicles of later years, which has been more successful for businesses of Mox.
Well, I'm a qualified Touareg technician when they first relieved them, but grown up for years having endless patrols through the family and all the rest of it, from having one with a Duramax in it, which was quite fun, to TD42s and a whole range of things.
Yeah, cool. What other four-wheel drives have you worked on and driven? Because you do a bit of camping and that outside of...
Yeah, I've done swivel hubs and stuff, and like arm bushes and all that on a GU Patrol, on a D-Max and BT50s and all that, and Amarok and Hilux off-road.
Originally, when I first met you, you had a Ford Ranger. that you built yourself, or there was something you did about it that was a little unique?
It was the Mazda version, the Mazda built one, the early one. So glorified Ford Courier, I guess you'd say. It was two-wheel drive and automatic. I converted it to four-wheel drive and manual. Rebuilt the motor in the process and tickled it up a bit. So,
Yeah, nice. And have you owned any other four-wheel drives, or that was sort of your first?
I did have a Courier before that.
Yep. So from a Courier to a Ranger, and now
It saw the light.
you saw the light and you bought an Amarok.
Yeah, a friend bought a later Ranger and they hadn't really improved all that much. It's a bit more tech and a bit more comfortable, but I still didn't think they were greatly reliable. So.
Interesting. Okay. So you've obviously driven a Ranger and a Courier outside of the world of Amarok. Have you driven many other four-wheel drives?
Yeah, I think I've driven sort of just about everything now.
Yeah. And you've obviously worked on a lot of different four-wheel drives as well.
Yeah.
Before you upgraded to the Gen 2, you did have a Gen 1 V6 Amarok.
So I had a Gen 1 4-cylinder. I've had 3 or 4 Gen 1 4-cylinders. V6 Gen 1, which was Dr. Rock, which is pretty well known in the
And you
photograph.
took that all over the place.
Yeah, they all went all over the place. I've been to Cape York in 2 of my Amaroks, off-road caravan, top with Dr. Rock, V6. Top of Cape York, that's right for the tip.
Which I vaguely recall running into on a dirt road up there.
Yeah, we did, which was good.
The V6 is, you will not, I don't think there's been and there ever will be, and it's probably a fair call, and plenty of people will want to argue the point with me, but from my experience with a lot of things, I don't think there'll be a better gearbox engine sort of comparison or combination, that's the word, ever before, and there'll never be one again. Obviously the Gen 2 Amarok's a different beast altogether, based on Ford Ranger. They're a nice car, but they're never going to have that combination again. And a low kilometre previous V6, I think only going to go up to value because they're going to be really hard to get, and they ride amazing. They've got heaps of power. They've got a fantastic gearbox. They're pretty cheap to service and maintain overall, and they're pretty darn good. And there's plenty of stuff available for them. People like us that have lots of gear that can make the bike capable.
And if you were buying one, would you go for the 4 or the 6?
I'd pick a 6, but
Why would you go a 6 over a 4? This is assuming you're taking off-road as well.
taking off-road as well, obviously if you're looking to do a lot of off-road, a lovely manual 4-cylinder will take you a lot of places and you'll have a lot of fun with low range and everything. The V6 and the standard 4-cylinder in an automatic, they don't have low range, but the ABS system is really tricked up and you actually get a fair way with no diff locks, none of that, and a V6 has that much power that you don't need low range. You just put your foot down in the 8-speed box and your ABS just respond, and actually you have more fun than the people that have all those things, because you're not getting out to put your locking your hubs and stuff. You're just driving through the muddy puddle and having fun.
Yeah, I have noticed that I will get through a lot more stuff than I would think I would, just because of that ABS system.
Obviously when we tune them, obviously we do endless tuning on them. They are a whole lot of fun, which make them a very enjoyable drive, whether they're taking the kids to soccer or going full driving or running up the beach to go fishing. They're a good truck.
Yeah, I think it's great on fuel, it's got power. The power, they drive like a car but in a ute chassis, so I think the suspension is very well set up. My wife has a Tiguan, a diesel, which is quite similar to the Amarok motor, and it's been a great car, but my daily was before this was an XR6 Turbo, so I still wanted some go.
If someone was to ask you about buying a 4 or 6, I assume you push them towards the 6, correct?
I think it's horses for courses, to be honest. My in-laws bought a 6 because they really liked how this went, and they're loving it. They love actually being able to overtake. They come from an old D-Max that didn't go. So changing over to a V6 that actually...
Was that a D-Max before the 4J?
Nah, still a 4J, it's just the early 4J.
Yeah, okay.
A bit lazy.
I personally think the Hilux is probably just a touch more capable off-road.
Yeah.
But the Amarok's a lot more comfier and a lot more better for touring and that type of stuff.
So if you had the funds, would you still go the Hilux or would you go the Amarok?
Definitely an Amarok.
Really?
Yeah, they're still quite capable off-road, and you got the comfort and all that for when you go touring, and the Amarok's good for towing.
Honestly, probably our service history. Obviously, yes, we service Amaroks, but obviously we've come to realise just how much looking after, and maybe more so with European cars, just how much it's worth looking after them. If you've got a really good service history and it's been looked after by somebody that knows what they're doing, it makes a huge difference, obviously. And then get it checked out. If it's got some of the known problems that, you know, talk to somebody like us, a specialist, and you know what those known problems are. If you make sure it's okay. Obviously, the V6 is coming into a more of a buyer's market at the moment with the price of those, and I don't think there's a better ute with an engine gearbox combination that would beat that. 4-wheel disc brakes, power outputs, nothing comes close. They're amazing for the money.
I don't want to see too much oil leaks, but they are a little bit common on Amaroks, V6 ones in particular.
Yep.
But I don't want to see.
I can vouch for that because I leak little.
Yeah. But I don't want to see too much coming from the rear timing cover, because that's a big job and an expensive job. You got to pull the motor out to replace that.
Yeah.
Reseal
and
it.
that's just the V6s. You've got to pull the whole engine out.
Yeah, just the V6s. You don't really find that, because on the 4-cylinders, the timing belt and stuff's at the front. It's not a timing chain. It's actually a belt on the 4-cylinders. But for the V6, it's a chain at the back of the motor.
Yeah, so you'd go the 6/4.
Yeah, I would go, a bit faster, a bit more fun.
Yep, and you don't particularly care for the lack of a low range in the 6.
No, because they make up for it in all the other aspects.
Things to look out on them, obviously, like any vehicle, oil leaks, general maintenance, all those sort of things, any coolant leaks, that sort of stuff, like basically anything that's going to make the vehicle unreliable. The first thing you're trying to check for. Major tips is get it checked out by someone that actually knows what they're looking at, and then you'll definitely get a great car. Or if it's been to a good rock shop, bring up the mechanic and see if he can give you some pointers of if it's been maintained and all that sort of stuff.
Is there any specific place you'd recommend they go? I assume not a dealership or anything?
The CRD Tech website is a great place to find the rest of the dealers, which all know Amaroks back to front. Other than that, you can always contact one of the CRD Tech boys. A lot of them still know other guys in the areas, so if you're stuck somewhere, give one of them a call and they can give you a shout out and actually tell you somewhere to actually go and see them.
Yeah, cool. So even if you're not listed near a listed shop, you can still find someone that will be able to help through the CRD network.
Yep.
Maintenance history is a big one. We actually saw our first catastrophic failure on a V6 a couple of months ago. One of the cam drive bearings had fallen apart and let go. It was a mess. And it seemed to come back to bad quality oils and questionable service history. I haven't seen a V6 major fail besides that one, except for I've heard of a few people without snorkels going for a drink. Just good service history. Dealer servicing isn't always wow, you got service at the dealer. So they changed the oil and shone a torch over it in case anything was actually falling off.
Specifically, if you saw a car with our local dealership service history, you'd probably have a deeper look.
Yeah, or any dealer. There's good ones and bad ones, and there's good techs and bad techs, and good apprentices and bad apprentices in any mechanical workshop. So you can't just blame any certain dealerships. There'll be cars that will come out of certain dealerships that are great, and other ones that have been looked after by and that are going to be getting a shock when we have a look. I always hate that phone call the first time they come in after a dealer history, because usually we've got a bit of a list of things that have been overlooked.
Wow.
I would be looking for that. Also looking for your oil leaks on a V6, coolant leaks. There's a little O-ring on top of the turbo, goes here and there. It's a whole, I think, $9 or something, and about 30 seconds to change. So that one's not scary. There's a plug at the back of the block underneath the left-hand head that I've seen a few here and there. It's fun to do. You get an arm soaked and down your armpit with coolant.
Gross.
But again, it's something you sort of doing once, not a stack of them.
Yeah.
And it's another cheap part.
But none of that cheap stuff would deter you from
Nah.
purchasing.
Even the oil leaks, if you get in the car for the right price, if you've got a rear housing leak, fix it once and be done. Like, and you've got a good car, they're comfortable, they tick a lot of boxes. CVs, check CVs for the boots. That's
Again, cheap fix.
I think they're $1,200 now for a CV. There's always an underlying issue with that. If the suspension's in the right way, they don't tend to fail.
Mm-hmm.
People talk about 565 hub to guard measurement. It's not just that. If your car's sitting on a flat ground and it's a 565, happy days. But then if you go and put a 3-ton van on the back, you've got excessive toe ball weight. There's the old
lift the front.
Yeah, the analogy I like is, remember when you're a kid and you'd sit on the seesaw and your big fat uncle would sit on the other side and you go right up in the air and sit there and it's not fun anymore? That's what's happening in a car when you put a stack of weight on the back and the front. Yeah, the front might have been sitting low, alright, but once you put that weight on the back and cantilevers, you're now above that height. Diff drops are a fix to that. Another thing we're seeing is actual wheel travel. If the struts have been assembled wrong or are loose or broken, and the front can actually drop past about 605, 610 millimeters,
Wow, it's a lot longer.
it will destroy the CVs.
Yep. And they just get pinched on the side of it.
They just travel out of their range, and it's the end of it. No one really talks about that, but that's often what we're finding is the cause with, cars, especially that are only sitting like 550. But yeah, you lift them up with the hoist and the wheels drop right down, and it's like, yeah, no, there's something going on in here.
And that's one of those things that you'd only really see from working on Amaroks day in, day out. It's not something your average mechanic would think to check.
Yeah, that's right. Consider standard, I think, measurement when they're dropped down is 600. So Bilsteins go to about that. You've got Dobinsons are usually long travel, will go a bit further. Outback Armours a little bit further, get 605, 610. Diff drops, again, goes well with a lot of that. Also your GVM Bilsteins, which are, I think they're a V8 off-road shock. They're a long travel as well. We normally recommend with them diff drop every time for that reason, for long travel.
So red flags on them, on the 6s and 4s? What would be it's got that issue or that mod hasn't been done?
Obviously, with the 4-cylinders, which is very well known, is the cooling system. They've often had problems with the EGR, the cooling system that's failed, which has therefore had underlying cooling issues, which is, if not dealt with, that or checked out properly, they can crop up, and obviously replacing heads or engines is very, very expensive. With the V6s, that's probably not a cooling system problem as much. There is some cooling systems like thermostats and stuff which are quite regularly replaced, but they never.
Connor was mentioning the thermostat issues.
Yeah, the thermostat issues and the injector seals, a few things like that.
Rear mains.
The rear mains is the biggest costly fix. There's the timing cover and rear main is the biggest cost, which is obviously pretty easy to tell if you find that problem if you're purchasing one. That's the biggest number one. Obviously, it's going to cost you a lot of money to fix that if you get one of those.
Mick was saying before that a good way to spot it is to check for an oil leak just next to where the starter is.
Yes. Yeah. Anything down the back of the engine obviously would be a concern. Check. Can we only spend 10k, I suppose, bare minimum by the time you replace some of what needs replaced while you're in there.
So you're looking bank on about 12 and you might be okay.
I'd say so. It's going to vary because each one of them's different. But if you're getting access to a lot of other gaskets and seals and bits and pieces, you just wouldn't not do it while it's there because you're just going to pull the engine to be able to do that again.
Yeah, sure.
In the future, so you may as well cope with.
So that's a big red flag if someone is
and it's not super common the amount we see. We don't see a lot, but it's enough to be wary of. And if you're lucky, like Dr. Rock's done 100,000 Ks, we service it regularly, looked after it. It's heavily modified, and never had a remote leak or
So for someone like me that's pushing their Amarok a little harder than most, you probably wouldn't want to buy something like that because the heat, it might be more prone to a leak.
Somewhat, but again, if it's serviced regularly and it's maintained and things are picked up early,
It's not an issue.
it's not as much of an issue. I mean, and some of it's still just luck. At the end of the day, it's an automobile, and you can have bad luck. You can buy the best prepared car, best service car, and then be unlucky and have a rear main oil leak on it, and that's just unfortunate.
Yeah, very unfortunate.
I think it was thermostat. It probably had to be number one, especially with the old style thermostats. They tend to snap the hinge as soon as you go just a little bit over the 90 degrees, and which causes them not to work properly, and then it causes all sorts of overheating issues.
Yep.
What else? All the rear timing cover leaks, which is unfortunate. Can't think of too much more really.
That's only 2 faults. I mean, granted, one's a pretty major one. That's, what is it, a $12,000 fix or something?
Yeah.
Yep.
Usually it's just easier to find a low K motor and put it in. Rock covers tend to leak a little bit, and the valley tab all the way down in the valley tends to leak a little bit as well when the elbow snaps. That's mainly on, I think it's 2016 or 2017 or 2018. One of those years is the year that tends to do that the most. Four bangers are actually quite reliable when it comes to that type of stuff. Like, we don't find too many leaks and stuff on four bangers, only injector seals or rock covers.
Do you think that's a heat related thing, or?
Yeah, probably, and I guess the power and stuff, they don't get as hot in a way, they don't work as much, they don't do as much as the V6.
Yep.
But yeah, if you just want a reliable car, then you don't care about going fast or having a bit of fun, then the four banger would probably be the way to go.
The DPF on the V6?
Yeah, we have more issues on the V6.
Common faults are things that obviously a lot of them are related to how people drive them and treat them. If people do a lot of towing with them because they do go so well, they can obviously get them hot, the same as patrols and things like that of the era, when you sort of request a lot of performance out of them and drive them hard and start towing big things, you will generate more coolant temps and oil temps and all that sort of stuff, which will shorten their life, which will then give you oil leaking and coolant leaking issues and things like that. So if you maintain and keep an eye on all those temps when you're actually using them under extreme conditions, you'll get a lot longer out of them.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, failures, sorry. Yeah, well, DPFs. 2017s and 16s with the bypass valve in the valley. See, obviously heaps of them. It's not a case of if, it's more a case of when. Although a lot of them on the market now would have been done and replaced. Once you get later than that, we don't tend to see it so much.
And is that an expensive procedure or time consuming?
Yeah, you got to strip the valley to do it, but it's something most of the time you're doing once. So people get a bit scared by the cost of some things, but you got to remember some of these parts are now updated, so you're replacing an early design which may have been flawed. Once you change that, you're probably not going to be visiting it again. I've seen a couple where they've been replaced by dealers early in the piece and they didn't do the elbow or the hose with it, so those have ended up failing later, and so you're sort of doing the job again in a way. But yeah, when we do them, we just change the whole lot. 2018s, we see water pumps here and there. Seems like there's a batch of them through that year, even getting to the start of 2019, because obviously the motors would have been built in late 18. So,
and that's just a leak, isn't it? It's not a catastrophic failure.
Yeah, it just starts leaking out the weed pole. It's obviously a seal issue. Again, once it's replaced. I haven't seen a 19 in later in 19 or a 20 or anything that leak.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen that many in the 2017s leak water pump.
And is that about 2 or 3 hours to replace?
Yeah, something like that. Thermostat's another thing. The early ones, they crack the hinge, then they won't control temps. A giveaway for us is often they won't actually get to running temperature in our road test route. when everything's working fine, they'll heat up in that time to running temperature, and we start seeing that they're still running reasonably cold. At the end of that, start to wonder if it's on, say, hinge brakes, they start to flow coolant. Things we're looking for when people talk about overheating is, is it doing something it wasn't doing before, especially without any other changes. If they're towing heavy, got a bar, spotlights, winch, the whole works in the front, you start seeing things are blocked, and you get in there and, you know, there's enough hay in the radiator to feed a bunch of cattle, well, yeah, it's going to overheat.
Yeah.
But if it's all sort of well maintained, you know, doesn't have a blocked up radiator, it's all happy, and it starts overheating out of nowhere, and you're actually seeing it on your dash gauge getting to 100 on a flat road not towing, there's something generally wrong.
Yeah, okay.
Especially when you start getting the fault code that comes at a higher temp, where they've derated because of temperature. Most of the time, our customers that have been towing and everything's happy and well, they don't come in with serious overheating issues or anything like that. They are an engine that runs a bit warm, and obviously they make power. Power is energy, energy is heat. So yes, they will, on big hills and that, if you're towing heavy and got your foot into it,
Definitely climb.
they will.
Yeah.
But again, if you're starting to see things they didn't do before, it's probably an issue.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just see the early thermostats just break anyway, and then they start playing up regardless.
And those heat issues can lead to something more major if not addressed, like Jim's car.
Yeah, so yeah, a customer that had no serious leaks went and had a play in mud, filled the whole radiator up with mud, and he was starting to overheat just driving around flat ground everywhere. Obviously, and he tows the trailer at times too. It's not a big trailer; he just does mowing that. So, and obviously that was worse. I've towed things this and not had temperature problems. He was seeing high temps just cruising around, and next thing he's got a leaking rear timing cover, quite bad.
Which on the Amarok is full engine out procedure.
Big and expensive.
And you're quite efficient at that. And how long does that take you?
We normally book them for a week to 2 weeks. Basically, that allows us to get other jobs done in the meantime. Occasionally, the dealer sends us parts and it's missing a few things, so we sort of allow for that sort of thing. Obviously, we don't want to block up 2 whole weeks and forget every other customer as such for that time. Yeah, so we get a few services in between that. Yeah, you might be waiting on parts, or you got to obviously get some help sitting the motor back in there. So yeah, we allow a bit of time, but it's generally, I think it's about a 10k job from memory.
Yeah, wow, that's huge.
Yeah, a lot of it's just the labour, because you pull the motor out and then you strip the top and the back of it. Another leak we do see now is there's 2 plugs in the valley under the fuel pump. Tends to leak out the front of the motor and down onto the sump. Sumps have seen a few leak, but yeah, generally what we're seeing when there's a leak down the front of the motor, it's usually coming out of the valley from those 2 plugs.
So most of these issues stem from the lack of heat dissipation that we just built up.
Yeah. So yeah, some of them have come from filling radiators full of crud. I had one, I put an intercooler in a couple of months ago, got in there and there was, the radiator was completely blocked solid with all sorts of grass and mud and bugs and everything. And so I think from memory that was pretty bad. Bugs turn acidic when they rot down, so it started to eat the actual core. So it was a whole radiator replacement with it.
Yeah, okay.
Not worth putting it all back in with the original one, even if you blow it out and then finding it fails because the core's fallen a bit. EGRs failing on 4 cylinders is common, particularly your CNEA, CSHA, which is all your later ones. CDCA and CDBA are earlies. Their EGRs aren't as common to fail, but to me, very first 4 cylinders, we're seeing heads just randomly go. We had one the other day, had an aftermarket thermostat in it, which we think was the root cause. I don't think it was working too well. Yeah, so early heads, and I've heard of that occurring across the Volkswagen range with earlier heads in the TDIs. I don't think once they've been done it's going to be an issue again.
Yeah, and you just avoid those earlier Amaroks if they've got a few Ks on them.
Yeah, I personally myself, if I was looking for a 4-cylinder, I wouldn't be looking at the early ones in particular unless it's had a head on it. Which yeah, there'd be plenty around now that have been fixed. Timing covers the early ones, so there's an updated one, just provides more protection if your auxiliary belt fails. Stops it prevents it to some degree from going into your timing belt and causing piston and valve sex.
Yep.
Big mashup.
And that updated cover is a pretty easy fix, isn't it?
Oh yeah, simple to put on, do it once, and it's fixed. Just get it done. If you're about to get a time belt done by any chance, just get it put on. I would even just have it done regardless. Another thing we see common, which can lead to these issues with time belts getting wiped out, is alternator sprags locking up. So it's a one-way clutch. Basically, when your motor is running on a 4-cylinder or any motor, there's a pulse as such from each injection and each fire. Creates a slight shudder, I guess you'd call it. That's how dual mass flywheels and things came about, to take the vibration out. You get the same problem, you got a mass spinning in the alternator that's reasonably heavy. So that one-way clutch allows it to sort of what's called an overrunning clutch or a sprag. It allows that alternator to keep free spinning when you back off or in between those pulses, so it doesn't shock load the belt continuously. When it seizes, it starts shocking the belt and destroys the auxiliary belt very fast. You hear a lot about people complaining of, I've been through 6 belts in 3 months.
That's the cause of it.
For destroying tensioners and things like that. Yeah, that's generally what it is.
That is interesting, because I've seen a lot of people on the Modrok forum say that.
All the time.
That's huge.
And it's the same thing every time. A lot of them talk about, I've had 3 tensioners done as well and had idlers done this and that. It's like, yeah, well, the one thing you've missed is the big bad one that causes the issue to start with. So
yeah, okay.
Change your alternator sprag, problem generally goes away. Can be a compressor failure cause it too, but that's not very common.
You touched on it before about heat. Being a European car, they are going to get a bit hotter and run a bit hotter. Is there anything specific people should do to mitigate that heat build-up?
Obviously around the thermostat, obviously make sure, particularly with the V6s, you want to make sure that we don't have anything unusual happening with the actual temperature. So if normally it sits on say 90 degrees and might go up a hill and stay just under the 100, and then all of a sudden it starts going to 110 or taking a lot longer to come up to running temperature, then something's out of the ordinary. So things like thermostats and things could be playing up, which needs to be looked at. So other than that, we do a few things. Obviously transmission cooler helps keep the transmission a lot cooler, not necessarily the engine. We have got a free flow grill mod to have more air in the front of it. You can take the back. Obviously, depending on how modified, the size of tyre you're running, all them sorts of things can load the engine up more and cause more heat build up. But you've got to understand that they do run a lot hotter. So a lot of people, when they see an engine spike, and the V6 Amarok has a tendency to spike at the tops of big hills.
As soon as I hit a hill, it starts going up.
So you got to understand that your turbo gets up to like 700 degrees. Your oil, it's cooling your oil down. So at the worst possible point on top of a big hill, it's cooling the oil. The turbo is the hottest it ever is, and everything dumps into the cooling, into the cooling system at that particular time to try and cool the engine down, and it spikes. But the spikes aren't really a problem. Usually doesn't go into any problem levels of overheat. Yes, they're spiking slightly, but once you get used to it and know how it spikes, I tend to just flick it over and pop it back a couple of gears. So I had a pedal steering wheel, which made it a little bit easier, but pulling it back a couple of gears before the hill always does help. Revs a bit harder, just holds the hill better. If ever your car, the V6 particularly, if you hear it sort of labouring while I was driving that particular model, if you're going up a hill and it really buries down and labouring, it's going to overheat more. Whereas if you pull it back a couple of gears and it's in that nice sweet spot, you sort of listen to it and you can actually tell when
I've
it's
definitely found that with mine, that just approaching big hills, and given I've not got reduction gears or anything, which you had in your last Amarok, as soon as I hit that hill, I'd often kick it back a gear or two, and you'd almost instantly see the temp drop.
You might rev a lot harder, but it's not actually working as hard because it's not labouring anywhere near as much. So it's just one of those things. Once you get to understand the cooling system and why it's spiking, and then a couple of things, I'd back off occasionally if I got around the 120 on a big hill, but ultimately up to that, it's a pretty normal sort of spike. It's if you understand and it goes back to normal and it's not playing up, like I said before, if it's taking longer to get up to running temperature, or it's going a little bit hotter than normally while you're just cruising up the highway, then something's out of the ordinary, and let's see why, whether that's mud in the radiator, whether that's the thermostat playing up. There's a number of things that we can look at. Ultimately, when they're in good condition and well serviced, the spikes aren't a major problem. And funny enough, out of the thousands of Amaroks we see, the 4-cylinder prone, when they did overheat, they'd do head gaskets and heads and all sorts of stuff, which was costly repair. The V6, even though they've always had a spiking problem, rarely ever overheat to where they cause any damage. If hardly ever.
Obviously, maximising airflow to your radiator is a great thing. Going through and obviously not blocking up the front of it with filling, if you've got a bar, and filling every gap with light bars and lights. Like if you've got a good set of lights, one set's enough. Basically go through and actually look after it, change your oil regularly, do coolant changes, get your coolant checked and tested with servicing, and go through and look after it.
We do this thing called grill mods on the Amaroks, where we get, the grill wasn't allowed too much airflow from factory through the grill, so we get rid of the back section of the grill so you get more airflow. Don't put spotlights or light bars or anything kind of
in front of that grill.
Yeah, in front of that grill really. And yes, just try and keep the front clear. Definitely get rid of your engine cover on the V6s in particular. I don't think they come on the 4-bangers.
No, just the 6.
Yeah, just the 6. Get rid of them because they just trap the heat in and just make it even worse. And yeah, that's pretty much it really. That's all you can do to minimise it. You can't really stop it in a way, but yeah.
When we set up sort of the final setup on Dr. Rock before Jeremy sold it, I went through the front, and first thing was making sure everything's not full of mud. Then it had a grill mod, that's a bit of a debatable thing. I like doing them. It's not a end-all be-all fix to heating, but it does allow that little bit more airflow into the top end. So we do like doing them. At the end of the day, it can't hurt anything, and it might just make that little bit of difference.
Get a little more air in there.
I went through and also moved things like horns and that out of the line of airflow, just to allow every little bit we could get in there. I do find a lot of the time, a lot of the cars are seeing serious issues with the towing heavy and have the, funnily enough, ARB bar work on them with winch and big fat 9-inch driving lights, and the more and more you block that airflow, and all of those things deflect the air up over onto the bonnet and away, not just around into the grill around it. So once you get up to that sort of thing, like that much stuff in the front, it is reducing the airflow and is going to affect it. I like to keep the front sort of as clear as possible. We're obviously running a lot of rival bars, and most of the time we found them pretty good, even with driving lights. Sometimes you see them with a light bar in the middle as well, and a winch, and they've got the spotties on them, and so you're still running back to that same problem. There's not much left there to get air into the front. So I think, keeping the front as clear as possible. Light bars are good. Spotties are great if you're going out west or doing big laps and you need the long distance light. But if you're just driving around town and just the occasional rural trip, light bars are generally enough.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. Don't take it as gospel.
How expensive do you reckon they are to maintain compared to your Hilux?
Oh, it's a hard question. If you, with the same with any car, if you regularly like service it in within the 10k, 5 or 10k intervals, and you keep up to date with everything, like you do your belts on time and your.
So you do it every 5k, you drop the oil and filter?
I try to, but it's 10k max really, you don't want to go over 10k.
Despite what Volkswagen say about it being 15?
Yeah, no, I would have went 15k, that's for sure. But
yeah, I did not every 10,
yeah.
So maybe I should be doing it every 5. That's every trip for me. That's
yeah, well, that's probably, 5's probably a bit much. That's for someone that's, I don't know, really like just...
Really loves their car.
Yeah, really doesn't want anything to go wrong, but nothing's really going to go wrong if you start the day before your maintenance and stuff like that. And, yeah, keep an eye on everything.
I think that's actually a misconception in the marketplace. A lot of people just believe that it's going to cost a lot more. You know, now with specialists like us that buy parts in bulk and look at alternative, non-genuine or genuine style product that is a lot cheaper, probably isn't any more, to be honest. In fact, if I put a Hilux through our workshop, I'd be very surprised that it was any different. So I think a lot of that's probably a misconception, but we've often joked that being an Amarok or Volkswagen, if you neglect it, it's like it knows and it punishes you for it. So it's like
I don't know if that's a joke. There's a lot of truth behind that.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of them things that you know, maintain it regularly and you get a good life. But you pick things up. You know, my guys are working on them all day, every day. They look at it and they just see stuff because they're looking at it all day, every day. The average Joe Blow mechanic that, you know, nothing against him, he's just not looking at it as many that we are, and they don't see the things that we will, because we know that those things are prone to fail.
So you get ahead of them.
Yeah, and that's just purely because we're looking at more of it. Yes, we service other stuff as well, but because we see so many of them, we've repaired so many, we've developed products, we've worked in the background trying to make things better and come up with better solutions. So we've sort of got our head around to where we can. There's a lot of preventative maintenance and there's a lot we can think about, or just know that, hey, we need to check that because it's a common point of failure.
On general, they will cost you as much as any other four-wheel drive, sometimes slightly more, but it all depends on how much you actually maintain them.
Yep.
And what you've done to actually do that preventative maintenance, actually protect them.
When you say slightly more, do you think it's an extra 30% on parts?
It would probably be 10%. It all depends on where you're getting your parts from, and at the end of the day, if you buy your parts from the right suppliers and actually seek out specialists that actually have done the research, like someone like our company, to go through and actually find the right products and recommend the right things, there is cheaper products out there, but you, at the end of the day, pay for what you get. If you buy something cheap and it's a cheaper Chinese built product, and some are really great, but some are poor, compared to some of the European products that will actually fix the job and you're only doing it once, it depends on what you buy.
Dr. Rock had quite a bit of lift.
Yep.
What sort of lift, if someone wanted the maximum reliable lift they could do, what would you say they should aim for?
Well, you really don't want to get too carried away because it's great to have a display vehicle and lift it off its head. And Dr. Rock, to go that extra lift, we had to do a lot of modifications, which is probably out of the really hard to justify in a lot of cases for that little bit extra lift. Just how much extra that cost versus the gain over what it does for you is very little.
Yeah.
It also had extreme angle CVs, and we modified V60 front suspensions. We had full long travel suspension in the front of that, which is the only one in the world I'm aware of that has done that level of suspension in it. But ultimately, we were running a 34-inch mud terrain, which I believe is a bit too big for that. In fact, we've recently just sold that car. A friend of mine, and we put it back on 33s. I think it's coming up with the right tyre combination with the lift and getting clearance on that tyre. I think the maximum tyre for that car to get maximum performance, keeping some fuel economy, not lugging it down too much and all those things if you're not going to lower diff ratios and all those sorts of things, which gets very, very expensive. A 32 and a half, like a 265/70 or maximum 33 is what you're looking for. And to clear that, you only need a 2-inch lift, a suspension lift, don't need a body lift. Obviously maybe upper control arms depending on the amount of offset on your rim, but ultimately that's going to still ride good. It's going to have enough clearance to clear everything you need to do without scrubbing or causing too much grief, and it's enough to get you capable and get you to wherever you want to go. Like high country, Cape York, do what you want.
Yep.
35 to 50 mil is the norm on suspension in the front. A lot of people only lift the back to 35 mil as well, but then at least you can actually go all the way to putting 33s on it. Above that, obviously you need to start looking at body lifts and things like that, which come in a legality issue. So it all comes down to what people are chasing to get out of it. The Amarok that we're currently sitting in is obviously got 33s on it. It's got a GBM kit. You can do that quite easily. We've got another one with 35s. So the newer ones give more lift and things, but the Gen Run Amarok is still more enjoyable to drive than this thing, to be honest.
Oh, we've had customers come in with like 35s and huge lift and all that, but then they just keep chewing CVs and stuff like that. So we probably recommend a 2-inch lift.
Yep.
With probably 33s max tyre size.
Yeah, okay.
And yeah, that'll allow comfortability as well. It'll be comfortable. You won't have heaps of body roll and stuff like that because your centre of gravity is way higher. Yeah, definitely do a diff drop because then you won't have any issues with CVs in a way.
Yep. Unless you strut to bottom out like mine did recently.
Yep. And don't lift it. Don't just want to go full cowboy spec and lift it miraculously. And
See, that must be hard coming from an ex-patrol guy.
yeah, well, I've never owned a patrol. I just have friends that have patrols, so. But yeah, just don't lift it too much because in a way it's not going to sound unbelievable or anything, but the lower you are, the more capable you are off-road because you get the full potential of your shocks. The more you lift your shocks, you're going to cap them out. You're probably going to be on the, how do I explain it? You're going to be at full travel of your shock just sitting there driving on the road.
Yeah.
So when you try and flex off-road, you're not going to get much flex and it's just not going to work.
Yeah, that makes sense.
To get bigger tyres, yeah, you lift them. Standard lift is generally around the 40 mil, 45 mil. We've talked about 2-inch lifts. Yeah, you can do it. You can push them. You put a body lift in them, you get fatter tyres. I've got one down the road from me that's on 315 70/17, which is like a proper big fat 35. But his guards are hacked to hell to fit them. It looks cool, and yeah, it's big. I don't know how it goes off road. I don't think there's much left in the travel.
And there'll be a lot of scrub.
Yeah, that's right. We do plenty with 285s, say 33s, and they sit great. We've had a few with your 33, like 12.5s, they're slightly wider. And yeah.
So general consensus is stick to your under 2 lift and go for a 33-inch.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you lift them really high and you're getting up to the top end of your suspension travel, they start getting toppy and that sort of thing. As far as suspension, I like the Bilsteins in mine. I think the best for them is the B60s. They're expensive, yes, but they'll do everything all day and every day. They're grooved, so they're adjustable, and I have not heard one person complain about a B60.
No minor night and day difference, even up from the B6s.
Yes, B6s and that, they can be a bit firm, but they are monotube, so they're a gas pressure shock. But they're also, I think they're quite robust. They handle well. Outback armour is quite good. Not what I've got in mind. Fitted plenty of them. Got no issues with them.
Cool.
They're great.
How does the Gen 1 Amarok compare to those other cars? Because obviously people say it's not a real four-wheel drive because it does have that limited slip center diff, no lock there.
Yep.
How does it compare, and do you think it's worth the payoff if you think it's better?
Look, it's a tricky question. Without a doubt, of all the four-wheel drives I've owned, live axle, front and rear locked, I've seen stuff, everything. Toyotas have had the lot. Without like a low range and a solid front and rear diff is definitely more capable, but you also got to weigh up how much you're using and how much off-road you're doing and what you're actually going for. It's quite amazing. Obviously Amaroks have a can, you know, if you're doing a high country bit of rock crawl and stuff, which I've done in Amarok, no low range is a little bit of a limitation, mainly in reverse, because you've got to understand that the forward gears in an Amarok, first gear is as low as the low range anyway, so reverse is a bit tall, so it's not quite as good, and the reverse torque limit on the Amarok's a little bit of a limitation. So you've got some things that you've got to be wary of, but set up right, it's incredible how well you can make them things still work. So it's not a write-off just because of those problems, but yes, you got to be wary of them, and it definitely tours better. I mean, it does drive like a European sedan in a lot of the cases, so it's not like a twin-locked old 60 series Land Cruiser, you know, hopping up the road, the rest of the highway running in that sort of different sort of uncomfortable car, you should say.
No,
so there's a payoff.
Say it's a couch on the house.
Yeah, I mean, so they are fantastic in that respect, and there's a bit of a payoff. You know, unmodified, my first Gen 1 Amarok 4-cylinder, straight up the high country like I've done with everything, and yeah, you know, I felt almost disappointed, but over the years we've grown with the vehicle, and you know, Dr. Rock, the V6 with some modifications and bigger wheels and gear reductions would just about, and we did the top of Australia and most of the telegraph track, and with that car, and it didn't miss a beat, and none of those issues really caught up.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
If you're comparing an Amarok to something like a D-Max, a standard sort of style D-Max, your suspension travel and all the rest of it is all within the same range. So other than a diff lock and the fact that the ABS system is so much more advanced, you'll get as far as that if you're comparing it to a 79 on 35s or something like that. Yes, you'll get further if you have bigger wheels, bigger tyres, all that sort of stuff. So it depends on what you're actually comparing it to. If you're comparing it to a Great Wall, you've shown it up all day, every day.
Yeah. I like your answer.
Or a Triton. They don't make them for men.
But what do they say? But it's reliable, or they don't break, or they say something.
Yeah, you can't frighten a Triton.
That's it.
It's scared of itself.
They've still got a Torsen centre diff. They've got a lot of tech in the driveline to actually, you know, use brakes and things to lock wheels that are spinning and all that. I don't find them too bad. I think they're actually quite good. Yes, you can't get big lifts out of them. You know, there's all these different things that you can't get out of them, whereas, you know, you might be able to put a 3-inch, 4-inch lift in your BT50s and your D-Maxes and that. But also they have a certain array of like how far they can actually drop wheels. So the higher you go with any car, the less you've got wheel drop. At the end of the day, they've got a diff lock. The last trip I went on, I don't even think I engaged it once. Didn't need it. The tech in the off-road mode did everything.
Yep.
Transfer case on them can be a bit weak if you abuse them. That Torsen centre diff doesn't like huge wheel spins separate from other wheels not spinning. So if you drive them sensibly and carefully, that would be fine.
Yeah, the only time I've ever done my centre diff is when I've left it at 40 pounds and done something a little stupid.
Yeah.
That's the only time I've ever ruined it, but if I've dropped some air out, it's not been an issue.
Yep. On the beach, fantastic. Most of your standard touring four driving, they're fine. They're not a rock crawler. If you want something to abuse climbing rocks and that, go buy a comp truck. Like, seriously.
Yeah, look, European cars, late model European cars, especially serviced and maintained, are good. They're definitely good. Even for myself, compared to what I was running around before, you know, failure or breakdown's been very minimal on all the Volkswagens. But again, as long as they're maintained, so anything's as good as how you look after them, of course. But all the late model European, particularly Volkswagens that I've run, have been really good and really reliable.
If they're maintained properly, and it's like everything, if you maintain a vehicle properly, it will be reliable. If you don't maintain them, then it won't be reliable.
So you've obviously tuned this, haven't you?
Yep. Toe tune, trans tune.
Was there a reason why you went for the toe tune over the performance?
Because basically looking at getting a camper van, so and I didn't really need a whole heap of top end power. I just wanted torque. Tends to depend on how they've been looked after. we see plenty. We had one here that had 450,000 Ks on a 4-cylinder, and didn't really have any issues with it.
Cool.
Jeremy only just sold it. I've seen V6s with 350,000 Ks on them with, yeah, nothing too serious. Generally, mine's done 230 now, and I had a vacuum line outside the motor fail, the little pop-it valve, so it had some vacuum issues for the brakes. And a couple of leaks. Other than that, it's been pretty good.
Nice.
So it just depends how they've been looked after. I would be looking probably around the 250s where you might start seeing some things happen. But you know what? I'd rather oil leaks and still get home than a Hilux or a Ranger that grenades a piston from an injector fail. So
That's what I've said. I've never not been able to get it home.
yeah, that's the thing. They've all got their issues.
Lovely. Well, thanks for that. Really appreciate it. It's been good.
No worries.
So tuning on an Amarok, particularly a V6 Amarok, again, I don't know of a car across the board, and maybe it's one of the reasons we grew so much is because there isn't a car that I know that responds so darn well to a tune. It is a no-brainer. They're so detuned out of factory, if you call it detuned, or they're just so tunable out of from factory, it's not funny. So, you know, if we tune a Hilux, Triton, or anything, we can make good gains, yes, and there's some advantages there, yes, but the gains you make on an Amarok is just hands down phenomenal, like minimum of 35% with hardly any risk. Like we're not pushing any limits. Like the thing just lives with minimal,
very reliable car.
yeah, minimal adjustment. We're getting fantastic advantages with a huge fuel economy saving and better engine longevity. Obviously, the car lasts longer. It gets better fuel economy. It goes, you know, something that comes in with 145 kilowatts. We got around, you know, around the 200 kilowatts with, I don't know, 550 to 650 newton meters of torque, and that's out the box without pushing it, making it, without trying to wring its neck. I mean, I can't get any other dual cab ute anywhere close to those sort of gains and keep it reliable. And that's probably one of the key things. It responds well, and I tell you, a fairly stock V6 Amarok, there's not much that'll blow you off of the lights. It's a pretty impressive, impressive car. Yes, you load up even four-wheel drive accessories, you sort of limit it back a bit, but at the end of the day, tuned is impressive. It's an impressive bit of gear tuned, and it's very, very safe and reliable.
There you go. That's your ultimate guide to scoring a used Amarok. If you can, find one that's well maintained, minimal leaks, and keep your mods sensible. Nothing more than a 2-inch lift and 33s. And if you can, get them checked out by a CLE Tech specialist. They're a specialist with tuning Amarok specifically for off-road use. If you found value in this, please like, subscribe. If you have any other questions, reach out and I'll do my best to help. See you on the next one.